The abandoned space station was cold and silent. Queen Valeriana stepped into the darkness, her heart burning with a mother's rage. Her daughters were missing, then, she saw it. A heavy footprint in the dust. It belonged to a Deathworlder, a human. In her world, humans were known as violent monsters. Behind the door, she heard a rhythmic thumping. Was it a war drum? Or was the human monster preparing for a kill? The silence of the abandoned space station was heavier than the darkness. It was a cold, dead place at the very edge of the galaxy, where the stars looked like dim, dying embers. Queen Valeriana stepped off her royal ship, her 4 metallic claws clicking sharply against the frozen floor. She was a tall, beautiful, yet terrifying insectoid being. Her skin was made of a hard, purple shell that shimmered under her glowing armor. Behind her, 6 of her elite royal guards followed. They were armed with heavy plasma rifles, their eyes scanning the shadows for any movement. The queen's heart was heavy with pain and burning with a mother's rage. 2 weeks ago, her life had been destroyed. Her 2 young daughters, the princesses of the Hive, had been snatched by space pirates during a raid. The pirates were long gone, but a faint emergency signal had led the queen to this ghost station. As she walked through the narrow hallways, she saw signs of a struggle. There were scorch marks on the walls and broken glass everywhere. The air smelled like rust and old chemicals. Valeriana gripped her energy blade tightly. She didn't just want her daughters back, she wanted revenge on whoever was holding them. The queen stopped suddenly when she saw something that made her blood run cold. Near the entrance of the nursery sector, there was a mark on the dusty floor. It wasn't the claw print of her own kind, nor was it the thin boot print of a pirate. It was a wide, heavy footprint with 5 distinct toe shapes at the front. Her guards gasped in unison. They knew what that meant. A human had been here. In their culture, humans were known as Deathworlders. Humans came from a planet with high gravity, extreme weather, and deadly predators. They were famous for being loud, violent, and incredibly hard to kill. To the queen, a human in the same building as her daughters was a nightmare. "The Deathworlder has them," one of her guards whispered, his voice shaking. He checked his weapon, making sure it was on the highest power setting. Valeriana did not speak. Her anger was now mixed with pure terror. She had heard stories of humans tearing through steel with their bare hands. If a human was holding her daughters, they weren't just kidnapped, they were in the hands of a monster. She moved faster now, her wings fluttering nervously against her back. Every shadow looked like a crouching human ready to jump out and attack. As they approached the heavy steel doors of the main nursery, the queen signaled for her guards to stay back. She needed to be quiet. She pressed her sensitive ear antennae against the cold metal of the door. At first, there was only the sound of the station's dying engines. But then, she heard it. A low, rhythmic sound coming from the other side. Thump thump. Thump thump. Thump thump. It was slow and steady. To Valeriana, it sounded like a war drum. She imagined a human sitting inside, beating a drum to celebrate his capture, or perhaps sharpening a blade against a rock. The sound was deep and powerful. It vibrated through the door and into her own chest. It felt like the heartbeat of a giant. The queen's eyes began to glow a bright, angry red. Her instincts told her that the monster inside was preparing for a fight. She could imagine the human standing over her small, fragile daughters, waiting for the queen to arrive so he could show his strength. The thought made her lose all her patience. She was no longer a diplomat or a ruler, she was a mother whose children were in a cage with a beast. She stepped back and raised her hand. Her guards lined up behind her, aiming their rifles at the center of the door. The rhythmic thumping continued, never stopping, never changing pace. It was a terrifyingly calm sound. Valeriana ignited her energy blade. The purple light hissed as it cut through the freezing air. She took a deep breath, her lungs burning from the cold oxygen. She knew that what happened next would. The smoke from the explosion swirled in the air like gray ghosts, making it hard to see. Queen Valeriana rushed into the room, her energy blade glowing like a purple sun. She was ready to strike, ready to tear the human apart. Her guards followed close behind, their heavy boots thundering on the metal floor. They expected to see a monster standing over his prey, or a battle-hardened soldier holding her daughters as shields. But as the dust settled, the scene before them was so strange and so unexpected that the queen froze in her tracks. Her blade flickered, and the fire in her eyes turned into a look of pure confusion. The room was freezing. Thick layers of frost covered the walls, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. In the center of the room, sitting against a large, humming heater that had long ago lost its warmth, was the human. He was much larger than the pirates they had fought before. His shoulders were wide, and his skin was covered in grease and dirt. He looked like a creature made of iron and muscle. His head was tilted back, and his eyes were closed. He looked dead. But it wasn't the human that stopped the queen's heart, it was what was attached to him. Curled up against the human's chest, tucked inside his thick, heavy survival jacket, were the two princesses. They were tiny compared to him. Their delicate green wings were folded tightly, and their small antennae were twitching in their sleep. They weren't crying. They weren't hurt. They were pressed so close to the human's body that they looked like they were part of him. The queen realized with a shock that the girls weren't just near him, they were using him. The human was sitting there like a massive, warm rock in a world of ice, and her daughters had found safety in his arms. Suddenly, that rhythmic sound returned. Thump thump. Thump thump. Now that she was standing just a few feet away, Valeriana realized how wrong she had been. It wasn't a war drum. It wasn't a weapon. It was the human's heart. Because humans came from a high-gravity world, their hearts were incredibly strong and loud. In the silence of the frozen station, that heartbeat had been a signal of life. Her daughters had been listening to that steady beat to keep themselves calm. They weren't hiding from a monster, they were sleeping to the rhythm of a protector's heart. The queen looked closer and felt a sharp sting of guilt. The human was wearing nothing but a thin, sweat-stained shirt underneath his open jacket. He had wrapped his heavy, fur-lined coat entirely around the two girls to keep them from freezing. His own hands, which were resting on the floor, were turning a scary shade of blue. He was shivering violently in his sleep, his breath coming out in small, weak puffs of white mist. He was giving every bit of his body heat to two alien children he didn't even know. He was dying so that they could live. Move back, one of the guards shouted, raising his rifle. The guard didn't understand what he was seeing, he only saw a death worlder holding the royal children. He prepared to fire his plasma bolt. But before he could pull the trigger, Valeriana let out a loud, commanding hiss. She stepped in front of the guard's gun, her eyes fixed on the human. "Lower your weapons," she commanded, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "He is not hurting them. He is saving them." The guards looked at each other in shock, but they obeyed, lowering their guns as they realized the human had no weapons near him. Just then, the heavy crash of the door finally seemed to register in the human's mind. His eyelids fluttered, and he let out a low, pained groan. His body was stiff from the cold, and every movement looked like it caused him great pain. He slowly opened his eyes. They were a deep, tired blue. When he saw the queen and her armed guards, he didn't scream or reach for a weapon. Instead, his first instinct was to tighten his arms around the girls, shielding them from the bright lights of the queen's armor. He looked at Valeriana, not with hatred, but with a protective glare. "Stay back," the human whispered. His voice was raspy and broken from the cold, but it held a strength that surprised everyone in the room. He didn't know who Valeriana was. To him, she was just another scary alien coming to take the children he had worked so hard to protect. He didn't care that he was outnumbered or that he was dying. He was ready to fight a whole army with his bare, frozen hands just to keep those two little girls safe for one more minute. The queen felt a tear roll down her face. She had spent her life fearing humans, but she had never seen such a pure display of love and sacrifice. The tension in the frozen room was so thick it felt like the ice on the walls. The human, whose name was Jack, struggled to stand up, but his legs were too weak. Even though he was shivering and half-blind from exhaustion, he kept his arms wrapped around the two princesses. He looked at the queen's glowing energy blade and then at her red eyes. To him, she looked like the monsters from a nightmare, but he didn't back down. He let out a low, protective growl, a sound from deep within his chest that made the royal guards take a step back in fear. They had never seen a creature so small and broken act so brave. Queen Valeriana realized she had to act quickly before her guards did something foolish. She deactivated her energy blade, the purple light fading into the darkness. She slowly reached up and removed her royal helmet, revealing her face. She made a soft, clicking sound, a mother's song used to calm the young of her species. At the sound, the two little princesses stirred in their sleep. They opened their eyes, saw their mother, and let out tiny chirps of joy. They tried to move, but they were so comfortable and warm inside Jack's jacket that they struggled to get out. Jack's eyes widened as he saw the children's reaction. The anger in his face slowly turned into a look of pure relief. He realized that this wasn't another pirate raid, the rescue team had finally arrived. His grip loosened, and his heavy arms fell to his sides. "You're their mother," he whispered, his voice barely a sound. When the queen nodded, Jack let out a long, shaky breath. The adrenaline that had been keeping him alive finally ran out. His eyes rolled back, and his body slumped against the cold metal wall. He had finished his job, and now, his body was finally giving up. The queen rushed forward, not to the princesses, but to the human. She caught him before his head hit the floor. Her guards were confused, wondering why their queen was touching a Deathworlder, but she didn't care. She looked at his hands, the skin was cracked and white from frostbite. She looked at the floor and saw a small pile of empty food wrappers. They were the emergency rations the princesses had in their pockets. Jack hadn't eaten a single bite, he had given all the food to the girls. He had also turned the only working heater toward them, leaving himself in the freezing shadows for days. "Get the medical team. Now!" Valeriana screamed at her guards. "If this man dies, our honor dies with him." The station suddenly became a hive of activity. Royal doctors rushed in with thermal blankets and healing gels. As they lifted Jack onto a hovering stretcher, they were amazed. According to their sensors, a normal creature should have died days ago in this cold. But Jack's human heart was still beating, slowly, stubbornly, refusing to stop. It was the legendary human, will to live, that the galaxy had always whispered about, but now the queen was seeing it with her own eyes. They took Jack and the princesses back to the royal flagship. For the next 3 days, the entire kingdom waited for news. In the past, the news of a human on the royal ship would have caused a panic. People would have thought the ship was under attack. But as the story of the Guardian of the Cold spread, the fear turned into something else. People began to leave flowers and bright ribbons outside the medical bay. They realized that the Deathworlder was not a bringer of death, but a protector of life. When Jack finally woke up, he was in a room filled with soft golden light and the smell of fresh flowers. He was tucked into a bed made of the finest silk. His hands were bandaged, and he felt warm for the first time in weeks. Sitting at the foot of his bed were the two princesses, drawing pictures on pieces of electronic paper. When they saw him wake up, they jumped onto the bed and hugged him, their small wings buzzing with happiness. Behind them stood Queen Valeriana, no longer wearing her scary armor, but a simple, elegant robe. She walked over and took Jack's hand in her